Tekken 8 is released today, so to make sure you can enjoy the game at its best, let's have a look at the graphics settings. Now this video is a bit shorter than usual, mainly because we have a look at the demo of the game and not the full game. But also the demo is locked at 60 FPS, and since my computer can run the game at ultra settings at pretty much that 60 FPS, I cannot really tell you how settings impact performance of the game. Well, we'll still have a look at the graphical settings to see how they impact the graphics of the game, and see if we can turn some things down without losing too much of its graphical beauty. And well, if your computer isn't running the game at that 60 FPS, hopefully these settings help you a bit. Welcome to Angus Gaming, guess who I am, and let's have a look. And right away you'll see my optimized settings running. Well, what can I say, I think the game looks very well indeed. And yes, FPS wise, it's a locked 60 FPS. Too bad I couldn't get rid of that lock. I would have loved to know what frame rates would be possible. Now keep in mind, this is the demo. Full game could of course have some other options, or perhaps the option to get rid of that 60 FPS frame limit. But well, I wouldn't bet any money on them removing it. Well, let's have a look at what settings I have set, and after that we'll have a look at most of these settings to see what they do. Anyways, running great, looking great, frame time graph is pretty much a flat line as well, so yeah, you'll have a lovely time beating someone up. And welcome in the settings menu. Now we're running the game at 4K of course, VSync is turned on. Usually I turn this off when I'm testing the game to see what the highest frame rates are I can get. But here turning VSync off just causes tearing but doesn't remove that frame limit. Upscaling. For the optimized settings, set it to DLSS performance, or FSR performance of course if you don't have an Nvidia card. This game does have a lot of upscaling options and I haven't looked at all of them, as I usually think DLSS is probably best. But in this case, thinking DLSS is best is an assumption on my part. And well then, anti-aliasing probably doesn't matter since DLSS is active. And DLSS uses its own kind of anti-aliasing. So therefore I set it to low, but it won't really matter. Shadow quality I set to medium. High does look slightly better, so if you don't have any performance issues with high, set it to that, but I think medium still looks pretty good as well. Texture quality. If you have the VRAM, and that is a little above 6 GB I think, leave it to ultra. Set effects quality to high. Post-processing quality, I mainly noticed it in the menu. I would leave it at ultra as it looks best and probably is only an effect in some cutscenes and won't impact gameplay. Background quality can be turned down to medium without you noticing much of it, I think. But I had a look at the PlayStation version and over there it was a higher setting than medium, just so you know. And then there's a cool option to enable an FPS counter. But well, if you have an Nvidia card, you can always get the FPS on screen by pressing Alt-Z and select some performance settings. Or if you have already, press Alt-R. But yeah, well, that's all I guess. In a moment we'll have a look at these settings to see how they impact the game graphics wise. But first, let me ask you to leave a like if these settings help you in any way. If these settings don't help you in any way, well, that's terrible, but hopefully you'll feel better after hearing my soothing voice and seeing my lovely face. Let's dive into each setting and see what they do. Settings, yes! Let's start off with the background quality. At ultra everything looks great of course. We have nice reflecting puddles on the ground, people in the background having a great time watching people have a fight to the death on the streets. Yes, how I would love to see this kind of violence in my city. And there is all kind of advertisement around. Now on high, I see no difference whatsoever. Nothing changed if you ask me. Now I must say, this setting does mention that it can automatically reduce image quality during certain scenes. So I don't know if it checks something to see if it needs to reduce image quality. Maybe it detects if it needs to lower quality when you're getting a lower than 60 FPS, which isn't the case here. But well, ultimately, I don't know. And going lower to medium. At first sight I thought everything looked the same, but when I look really carefully I do notice some lighting change on the plants in the back and the middle. But I wouldn't really notice this when playing the game, it's such a small detail. And besides, I don't really know if the lighting looks better or more realistic, just different. But that's about the only thing I noticed, to be honest. At low, however, we see a big change, and that is that of the reflections in the puddles. These are certainly diminished, and that's a change you don't want to have, I think. Those reflections look great. Also, the plants in the back are a little bit smaller and a little bit less detailed, I think, but that is less noticeable. The reflections are the main reason I must say turn this setting no lower than medium. Looking at them side by side, you can clearly see the reflections missing on low, and you can see the difference in the plants on medium versus high. But I would say this is not something you would notice when playing the game while you are paying attention to the fight itself. So I would choose medium here. I did, however, had a look at the PlayStation version, and there I noticed that the lighting on the plants seems to be at the high or ultra level, so just so you know. And of course, but that counts for all settings, if you get no FPS win out of this, leave the setting at a higher level. Effects quality up next, and starting off with a bit of the fight between Jin and Kazuya. I must say this looks really great and has lots of effects. Flying particles, lighting lines when you kick, hit explosions, cool stuff we're expecting from a Tekken game. As if I would know, I haven't played Tekken that much. Dead or Alive was more my go-to beat 'em up. Switching to high, I think we still have all this stuff. I see lots of particles, colored lines emphasizing the movement sometimes, so I don't really miss anything, I guess. At the medium level, I still think we have all these things. Fights look great and still have a lot going on if you ask me. Still don't really get the idea effects are missing. And on low, I still see the same amount of effects, I think, but I get the feeling that some effects are a bit smaller inside, but it's a feeling at the moment. Let's try to put images side by side so we can see it a bit better. And using the power of slow motion, I think we should be able to see some differences if there are any. And here I think we indeed do see a difference. Mainly in the amount of particles flying away. On the low setting there clearly are less pieces of broken street flying around. Also the shock effect seems to be missing from low, and that shock effect seems to be of a lower quality on medium. But would you notice that in full speed? Well, just in case I would say leave this setting at the high quality. And with that said, we'll move on to post-processing quality. Now I don't really know where you see post-processing in-game, but in the menu screen you'll definitely see it. So having a look here. And you will mainly start to notice the effect in the eyebrows of Kazuya. And by the way, can we take a moment to notice his eyebrows? Man, I sometimes have just one hair out of control, but he is a full eyebrow out of control. Incredible. But it's the depth of field effect. On Ultra his eyebrows are a bit out of focus. Now moving on to high, you'll see his face, but again those eyebrows, especially the one on the right. It's a bit more sharpened, more in focus rather than out of focus. Still looking good, but I rather have that out of focus look. I think Ultra preserves a bit more of a cinematic look. Also, I think you'll only see these kinds of effects, well, here in the menu of course, but otherwise only in cutscenes. That aren't pre-rendered by the way, because some clearly are pre-rendered and will look the same no matter what setting you use. But okay, we're going to have a look at medium and low, because maybe you want to turn this setting down because it makes the game or cutscenes run better for you. Now on medium the eyebrow really starts to look a bit video gamey if you ask me. It has a kind of unreal sharpness to it. I must say though, the rest of the image still has a nice depth of field effect, so that's not completely gone. Which it is when switching to low. No depth of field at all anymore. And also there's some slight color change. The whole image looks a little bit yellowish. Side by side you will see it rather well. The low quality has a yellow hue. If you really need to turn this down, I wouldn't go lower than medium, but for the optimized settings I would just leave this at the highest level, at ultra. Looking at shadows, and you can see them in the distance on the ground, but also you can see the shadows of a tree and leaves moving around on Paul. On ultra, looking great. On high, looking great as well. Don't really get the impression we've lowered any settings or get a lower quality in shadows. Now we'll look at the shadows of fighter casts on the ground in a moment. Maybe we'll notice something there, but well, high looks about the same as ultra I would say. Going lower to medium, I think the shadows are less detailed, and I mainly noticed that on Paul. The shadows cast on his jacket seem to be bigger or more of a block rather than a finer detailed ones. Shadows on the ground in the back however still look pretty much the same, so not losing too much detail there. Which we do when switching to low. Shadows are completely gone, So well, if you like your places sunny without any shading at all, use low. Otherwise I would say go for medium or high perhaps. A quick look side by side and you'll notice that the shadows on medium versus high look a bit less detailed. But I think the impression of shadows is still good enough. You don't have time to count leaves when you're fighting your worst enemies. But let's have a look at character shadows. And it was a bit hard to put Tina in exactly the same position every time, but I think this will do well enough for the comparison. Now on low the shadow is nowhere to be found. On medium the character shadow has a little bit of a shimmer, and that shimmer is a little bit more than it is on high, but high still has a little bit of a shimmer in the shadow. And that shimmer is gone at ultra. Well, based on these, I would say go for medium. It gets the job done well enough and that shimmer is not that bad. So medium it is for shadow quality. Now texture quality usually doesn't impact performance if you have enough VRAM. If you do not have enough VRAM however, it can definitely impact performance. So let's have a look at the VRAM usage. And on Ultra it's about 6.4 GB. On high we see that number is quite a bit lower, 5.6 GB, while not looking really any worse I would say. And then on medium I still think things look pretty good to be honest. VRAM usage again is quite a bit lower, 4.5 GB, not bad. On low VRAM usage is 3.6 GB, but now the quality does seem to decrease quite a bit. The logo of the police department on the car is almost illegible now, and the lines on the leather jacket of Jin are less sharp and have a staircase effect instead of being straight lines. And also the lines on the pants of Kazuya are less visible, so all of a sudden quite a loss. Looking at the texture side by side, I think each step you lower the texture quality they get a little bit less sharp, but you really need to be focused on them to see it. The low setting however is quite a big change all of a sudden. But well, I would only lower these if you have limited VRAM, otherwise I would say use Ultra. But that's about it. Now as a kind of test to see if I could record from my PlayStation via remote play, I recorded a bit of PlayStation footage, you see here on the left. And setting it next to the optimized settings on the right to see if I could notice differences in settings. And I think we cannot exactly. Remote play has a lower resolution, so for texture settings for example, you couldn't tell the difference because of the lower resolution. I did have a look at the shadow detail and the background detail, and I do think these are set at least one step higher than in these optimized settings, but would you really notice when playing? Well, I think you can choose for yourself what settings to use now, and if your system can handle it, of course turn up the graphics. Otherwise, with these optimized settings, I think you'll have a great gameplay experience. If of course, the full version doesn't all of a sudden completely changes these settings. Well, anyways, have fun. I think I'll be waiting for the next Dead or Alive, although I think that will be a long wait. That's it for Tekken, the demo. Thank you for watching of course, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like these. If you have any suggestions for games I should have a look at, or other game related stuff, let me know in the comments down below. Now in 2 weeks I'll be back and I'll dive into the world of, or rather break down the world of, the finals. Well, I'll hope to see you then. If you want to watch more, check out my Gotham Knights video, and otherwise I'll see you then. Houdoe!